Okay, today you have Q&A. We'll start with the 160s. On your 160 number one, you have Miss Baker, Ty Lombard, Ty, Ms. Lee, Pittsburgh, Dr. Kegel, and Mr. Lombard. This is your 160 Q&A for 5 minutes. Ready? Ms. Baker, do you remember the incident that brought all these matters forward?
Yes.
At the time, there was some improper billing. Is that correct?
Yes, it was, but not from me.
Were you in any way involved with Ty Lombard? Am I pronouncing that name correctly?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Basically, I wasn't involved in any matter, but the only thing that I could tell, he was using my name on some bills.
Were you engaged to him, Ty, at the time?
Yes.
Did he use your name without your knowledge?
Yes, he did.
Did there come a time when you discovered he had used your name?
Yes, after the arrest.
You were arrested, correct?
Yes.
I want to ask you a question. Are you waiving the attorney-client privilege between you and Ms. Lee as to what you discussed?
Yes.
Do you understand what I mean by that?
Yes.
Did Ms. Lee advise you to plead guilty on that plea?
Yes.
When you pled guilty, did the court ever ask you if you ever committed a crime?
No.
Did the court ask you if the facts of the crime that you committed were true?
No.
Okay. And did you plead guilty to a misdemeanor?
Yes.
Why did your attorney tell you to plead to a misdemeanor?
There were a couple of different reasons, as I recall.
Will you tell us what those were?
First of all, I was told it was a bargain. What do you call that? I can't recall.
A plea bargain?
Yeah, if somebody pleaded guilty or was convicted of any kind of a felony, everything else would be a felony too. So that was like I pleaded guilty because I didn't want it to go farther down to be guilty of something I wasn't doing.
Okay. I think I see what you mean. When the fraudulent billing was done, were you in chiropractic school?
Yes.
When you pled guilty to the misdemeanor, were you in chiropractic school?
I was starting basically the first 6 months that I was starting there.
Did you since marry your fiance?
In fact, my marriage date is just 1 week after the time they arrested him. So basically, I did not know what was the marriage for, and he had some kind of plan to go through all this process and putting up a front and using my name.
You have since divorced him?
Oh, yes.
When you started chiropractic school, were you concerned about a felony conviction?
Yes.
Why were you concerned?
Because I was going through the chiropractic school and I didn't want this kind of felony charge in my record. I don't want anything on my record.
What did your attorney tell you about that?
She told me if I pleaded guilty and I accepted a misdemeanor charge, I would not, well, basically, I would not have any problem with this case.
When you say this case, you mean what we are here for today?
Yes, exactly.
How long did you stay in chiropractic school?
3.5 years.
Did you complete that schooling?
Yes, I did.
Did you go into practice?
Yes, I did.
Tell me about your practice now. What are you doing?
I am basically doing a very ethical practice.
Where are you practicing?
City of Pittsburgh. Right now, I am practicing and very satisfied with my career.
Are you practicing with anyone?
I am practicing with another doctor.
What is his name?
His name is Dr. Kegel.
How long has he been practicing?
He has been practicing for 7 years.
What do you do in your practice?
Basically, just treating the patient the right way, an ethical way, not overcharging, not overbilling, not overdiagnosing anything that is not right, or doing anything that would be considered a violation of the patient's rights.
I see. Do you run your practice yourself?
Yes.
Do you do your own billing?
No, I don't do the billing. The billing is done, it's done by the owner of the clinic, which is Dr. Lee.
Had you signed any claims for any billing at all?
No.
Were any of the signatures on any of those claims yours? I mean, had you signed any of those claims?
I only signed one check, just one check. That basically was the only signature they got from me, and they told me I am responsible for this case. That was the only signature they had from me.
Was that a check that came in and your fiance told you to sign it?
Yes.
Did you know what it was for when you signed it?
Not at that time.
When did you find out?
A couple of years ago.
Just a couple years ago now? You say you only found out now? Is that correct?
Yeah, when I basically noticed what he was doing. It was not even during the time that we were going through the divorce.
When you pled guilty, were you told whether or not you had to make restitution?
I did not know. Basically, they told me there wouldn't be any restitution at that time if I pled guilty.
Did you since find out they wanted restitution?
Yes, maybe a year and a half after the case was basically discharged, they told me that. It was exactly a year and a half after that they told me I had to pay restitution.
How much did you have to pay?
It was about 8,000 something, I think. I have it in one of the papers.
Did you pay them?
Yes, basically I paid half. I mean, as much as I could, and the rest of it Ty Lombard paid because he knew he was responsible.
Mr. Lombard? Okay, and your 160, number 2, you have Ms. Torres, Mike, Francisco Moreno, Peoples 1, Mike Moreno, Toyota SUV, Peoples 2A and B, Bering Cross Parkway, Mary, and Peoples 3. And this is 160 Q&A, number 2 for 5 minutes. Ready? Mr. Torres, I want to go back to the evening of April 26, about 2 years ago, and ask you who you were with that evening.
In the evening, I was with my 2 friends. It was Mike and Francisco.
Do you know Mike's last name?
Moreno.
Please spell Moreno for the record.
Moreno.
Please spell Francisco for the record.
Francisco.
Thank you. Showing you Peoples 1 for identification. Do you recognize that person?
Yes, I do.
Who is that?
Mike Moreno.
At any time that evening, were you in Mike's car?
Yes, I was.
What kind of car was it?
Toyota SUV.
What color was it?
Black.
I have put Peoples 2A and B up on the board. Do you recognize that car?
Yes, I do.
Was that Mike's car?
Yes.
That evening, were all 3 of you in the car, you and Mike and Francisco?
Yes, we were.
And where had you been, or where were you coming from?
First, we were at my mom's house.
Without telling us the exact address, what area was it or the street?
Somewhere on Bering Cross Parkway.
Bering Cross Parkway, correct?
Yes.
When you left your mother's house, where did the 3 of you go?
We were on our way to my house, but we stopped at some girl's house.
Do you know the name of the girl whose house you stopped at?
Mary, I think.
Was Mike driving at this time?
Yes, he was.
Was it Mike's idea to stop at Mary's house?
It was.
Was this close to where your mother lived and where you lived?
Yes.
What happened when he stopped at Mary's house?
He talked to her.
Okay. He pulled up in front of her house, is that correct?
Yes.
Did he get out of the car?
No, he didn't.
Did any of the 3 of you get out of the car?
No, we didn't.
Did Mary come over to the car?
Yes.
How did she know that you were there? Did he honk or call her name?
That girl was there. She was standing there in front of her house talking on her cell phone.
I see. We're talking about Mary?
He's seen her in front of her house, so he called to her.
She was in front of her house?
Yes, and then he pulled over. He called her and told her, come to the car.
And she walked over?
Uh-huh.
Yes? Is that a yes?
Yes, she did.
Showing you Peoples 3 for identification. Do you recognize who that person is?
Yes.
Who is that?
That girl Mike was talking to?
That's Mary?
Yes.
When she came over to Mike's car, was she standing near the car?
She was leaning on the top of the window. The window was rolled down. She was leaning there.
Like leaning into the car?
Yeah.
On which side of the car?
On the driver's side.
And approximately how long did she talk to Mike?
About 10 minutes.
Did you know her?
No.
During that 10 minutes, did you or Francisco or Mike ever get out of the car?
No.
What happened after 10 minutes?
What happened? Well, he just kept talking, you know. They were talking, making plans, you know. They were making plans for us to, you know, meet later on, you know. She was going to bring some friends over, some girlfriends.
I'm sorry, they were making plans?
Yes, we were going to meet at a later time.
On that evening?
Yes, and she was going to bring some friends over.
Who was going to bring friends over?
That girl, Mary.
All right. After you left Mary's house, where did you go?
To my house.
How long were you and Mike and Francisco at your house?
Well, we were there a long time. When we were all together, we were there till later in the evening, way later in the evening, just talking and playing video games.
Were you there an hour, 2 hours, if you remember?
More than that, a lot more than that.
And at some point later in the evening, what happened?
Mike chose to go with the girl, so he left.
He told you he was going back to Mary's?
Yes,
Did you go with him?
No, I chose not to go.
What about Francisco?
He chose not to go too.
So it was your understanding that Mike left to go to Mary's house?
That's what he said.
Okay. Did you ever see Mike alive again after he left that evening?
No.
Mr. Torres, as I understand it, you had been to your mom's house with Mr. Moreno and Francisco. Okay, now your 140s. You have Ana Varga Gonzalez, number 10, Rawhide Lane, Rawhide, Carson, Mexico, Orion Specialty Foods, Orion, South Vermont, Kent, Paul Rodriguez, Ms. Gonzalez, Mrs. Martin, Mr. Antonio Lopez, Antonio Perez, Pedro Lopez, Sal Perez, Jose Perez, and United States. So this is your 140 Q&A number 1 for 5 minutes. Ready? Can you please state your full name for the record?
Ana Varga Gonzalez.
Please be advised that you are entitled to take a break at any time you feel necessary. If you'd like to take a break to get a cup of coffee, use the restroom, please let me know and we'll take a break.
Very well.
What is your date of birth?
December 19, 1969.
Your current address is what?
Number 10 Rawhide Lane.
How do you spell that? How do you spell Rawhide?
Rawhide.
What city is that in?
In Carson.
The zip code is what?
90745.
How long have you lived there?
3 years.
Do you own that place?
Yes.
Is that a home or an apartment?
It's a townhouse.
Who do you live with there?
My husband and my children.
How many children do you have?
3.
And their ages?
The oldest is 16.
Is that a boy or a girl?
It's a girl.
Who else lives there?
The next is 11, and he's a boy, and the baby is 3, and he's a boy.
How long have you been married?
18 years.
Have you obtained any education in the United States?
No, I have not.
Did you obtain education in Mexico?
Only high school.
Did you complete high school in Mexico?
Yes.
Are you currently employed?
Yes.
With whom?
With Orion Specialty Foods.
Please spell Orion.
Orion.
How long have you been employed with them?
17 years.
What is their address?
225 South Vermont in Kent.
Who is your supervisor there?
Paul Rodriguez.
What's your salary with them?
$12.
Is that per hour?
Yes.
How many hours a week do you work?
40.
Have you ever been convicted of a felony, Ms. Gonzalez?
No, never.
Do you have a valid driver's license?
Yes, I do.
May I take a look at that, please, after you hand it to your attorney?
Yes.
Ms. Gonzalez, I represent the interests of Mr. and Mrs. Martin, who were the homeowners of the roof that your father was repairing on the day of his unfortunate accident. Do you have any knowledge of what took place on the day of the accident?
Only the comments that were made by the person who went to work with my father, that he had slipped and fallen from the roof.
Who told you that?
Mr. Antonio Lopez. That was the person with whom he went to for that job.
Was it perhaps Antonio Perez who told you that, or was it perhaps Pedro Lopez?
I'm sorry, it was Antonio Perez.
And he told you there was a slip and fall?
Yes, that's what he told us. That's what he said, yes.
When did he tell you that?
That evening when we went over to the hospital over there.
Was this the evening of the day he fell?
Yes, it was.
Did you ever speak with anybody else after this time regarding the facts of the accident?
No, not with no one.
You never spoke with any of the other employees that were at the roofing job on the day of the accident?
No, because we didn't know anybody else, just Antonio Perez.
Are you familiar with Sal Perez?
I know that he's a relative of my father, but we don't have any relation.
Did you ever speak with Sal Perez regarding the accident?
No, not about the accident.
You were the daughter of Jose Perez, is that correct?
Yes, correct. That's correct.
Can you describe to me your relationship with your father?
We got along very well. He was a very understanding person.
When was the last time you had lived with your father before the accident?
How do you mean lived? Before the accident?
Yes, before the accident. Did you ever reside under the same roof with your father?
Yes, I did.
When was the last time?
When I came here to the United States. When I arrived here in the United States 19 years ago.
And how long did you live with him?
A year and a half.
How often would you? Okay, in your 140 Q&A number 2, you have Tobias and Sizzler. This is your 140 Q&A number 2 for 5 minutes. Ready? Okay, now tell us what happened then.
I asked him what he wanted, and he asked me, well, he tried to ask me or tell me to call the police. I couldn't understand him very well.
Why not?
Because his mouth was all messed up.
What do you mean messed up?
He had blood coming out of his mouth, and his lips were all swollen up.
At that point, did you notice any other injuries on the man?
No.
What did you do then?
I told him to come into the area just by the front door so I could lock the front door because he had stated he had been beaten up. I was a bit concerned in case there was somebody still following him. I brought him in and locked my front door. I walked into my living room, to my dining room, to the telephone to call the police.
Did you call them?
Yes.
And did you tell them what had happened?
I told them that I had a gentleman in the house who had stated he had been beaten up, and he looked hurt.
Then what happened as you were talking on the phone?
Well, as I was talking to the policeman on the phone, the gentleman turned his back to me, and I noticed the back of his jacket from the shoulders to the waist was soaking wet with blood. and I told the policeman on the phone I thought they better send an ambulance because he was a lot more hurt than I thought he was.
Did you talk to that man?
Yes,
And what was said?
he said he had been beaten up, and the policeman asked me his name, and I couldn't understand him. Then he opened his jacket, and he had a name tag on it, and I told that to the police.
What was the name on the name tag, if you remember?
Tobias, I think. I'm not terribly sure. Well, yes, I read his name.
And his name was Tobias. That was his first name, is that right?
Yes, it was a Mexican name, Tobias.
Did you recognize the kind of clothes that Tobias was wearing?
Yes, he had a brown shirt on and I think brown or black slacks and a jacket.
Did you recognize the clothes as being some kind of special kind of clothes?
Yes, they were from the Sizzler. The name tag had the Sizzler on it.
And do you remember the exact words the man said to you about what had happened?
He just said he'd been beaten up. When he got home, he laid down. He had a couple of beers at work, walked home, got to the house, laid down on the couch, and started to fall asleep. And this crazy man came into his house and beat him up.
Okay. Did you have difficulty understanding Tobias?
Yes,
And why was that?
because, as I said, his mouth had a cut or something. I don't know whether he had injuries in his mouth. Plus, he had a very strong accent, worse than mine.
What kind of accent?
Mexican.
Okay. And did you have any other conversation with him as you were on the phone with the sheriff? Do you recall?
Not while I was on the phone, no. They said they would send a paramedic, and I started to walk towards the front door so I could wait for them there. The gentleman followed me, and I stopped. I have a bar on my left-hand side, and I stopped there, and the gentleman took the gun out of his waistband and asked me would I give it to the policeman. And he said it didn't work because he must have seen the expression on my face because I looked terrified. He said, "No good, it doesn't work. Don't be afraid."
What words did he use to tell you it didn't work?
No good, it didn't work.
Did he actually hand you the gun? Do you recall?
He started to hand it to me. He pointed it down all the time. He wasn't pointing it at me at all. I do remember